maneuver myself. Everyone seated? Okay, a very good morning to everyone. Nice to see so many of you here on a Monday morning to talk about the education system, and good morning to everyone joining online as well. I'm Suping Chan, I'm economics editor of The Telegraph, and when Joe texted me and said, would you like to moderate this panel, I said I was delighted to, because my day job is actually writing about interest rates and what Rachel Reeves is doing in Downing Street, but I actually think a lot of what I do is impacted by education policy and some of the great work that has been done actually here at the Centre for Social Justice, things like school absence, which I think will cast a long shadow on the economy for a long time to come. But today we're here to talk about rewiring education and the state of technical learning in England, and basically how we can rebalance the education system, and should we rebalance the education system so that more young people are excited about the prospect of a technical education. So I'm delighted to introduce a distinguished panel to talk about this subject. So if I start furthest away from me is Louise Gorsh. She's Director of Operations at Jericho. It's a Birmingham-based charity that helps young people just get on the career ladder and get on with their lives. And then next to her is Ian Solomon, Liberal Democrat MP and the spokesman for education for the Liberal Democrats. And then Lord Gove, editor of The Spectator, and of course former Education Secretary under the Conservative government. And last but not least, Jonathan, not last but not least, but Jonathan Gullis, he's a senior fellow here at the Centre for Social Justice, a former education minister and now representing Reform. I should tell the audience that at 11 a.m. we will be joined by Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, to share his thoughts on what's going on in the education system and perhaps some other thoughts as well. But for now, let me hand over to Daniel Lilly, who's done some really important work on this subject.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for being here today. So this event marks the start of this journey for the Centre for Social Justice. We'll be spending the next few years really getting under the skin of how we can rewire education and get technical learning where it needs to be. I'm just going to spend a few minutes framing the problem and then we'll head into the panel. So first, the context. As the slide shows, it's important to note that although our education system is unbalanced, it is not failing. On PISA rankings, PIRLS rankings, and domestic measures, we see good progress in recent decades. But we also see a system that is hierarchical. If your GCSEs go well, you begin a trustworthy treadmill. You're highly likely to take A-levels, study them at school sixth form, and roll straight into university, often a top third university. If they don't go well, much of your time will be spent trying to get back on the academic route, often at a further education college, retaking GCSEs, or studying other equivalent courses. And as the chart shows, it's highly unlikely that you will continue into a higher apprenticeship or higher technical qualification. Instead, there is a cycle until you either get into university, leave education and start a job, or leave education and enter nothing. Much of this is because technical pathways haven't got going. Perhaps the best example of this, as on the slide, is apprenticeships. Although they grew well in the years leading, just a slide after this one. Although they grew well in the years leading up to 2015, apprenticeships have faltered in the last decade, especially among young people, as we see their 40% decline. And looking at what young people go into immediately after they finish their compulsory education, 38% go into degrees and just 7% go into apprenticeships, just 7%. But a fair question here is, well, what are the consequences of it? Why does it matter? We know that we have a world-leading university system in the UK, so why should this bother us? The problem with it is it distorts our education system. And two distortions are most obvious. The first here is that London dominates. The system is designed around what works in the capital. So to explain the chart, it shows how well pupils progress between the ages of 11 and 16. And it's a really good measure for secondary schooling because it captures the starting point of a pupil. Everywhere but London, it's negative. And in London, it's massively positive. The second distortion is that those who are behind by age 11 tend to just fall further behind because there's no viable alternative for you if academic doesn't suit you. If you're behind when taking your SATs in year 6, age 10 or 11, you're 3 times as likely to become NEET, not in education, employment or training, at 18. You're half as likely to be continuing education. And you're also less likely to be studying for an apprenticeship. But sadly, it doesn't end there, because a distorted education system also distorts our labour market. And we see this in 3 ways. First is the NEETs crisis. 3 in 5 16 to 24-year-olds who are not in education, employment or training have no qualifications beyond GCSEs. And a third of them don't even have GCSEs. They were the wrong size in a one-size-fits-all system. And then the second 2 come as a pair, an excess of graduates and serious skills shortages. In the UK, if you look at 25 to 34-year-olds, we have 3 who are university educated for each 1 whose highest level of qualification is vocational. If you go to the Netherlands, that's 2 to 1. In Germany, it's 1 to 1. And unsurprisingly, the result of this is a situation where 5 years on from qualifying, a level 4 apprentice is earning over £5,000 a year more on average than a university graduate. The distortions in our education system make their way into the heart of our economy. So what do we propose to do about this? Well, that's why we're here gathered today. We're here to grapple with and debate this very question. It's why it's so valuable that we have a cross-party panel to look at how to solve this issue. But before we head into this, our report sets out 5 principles to start that process. First, that technical education needs to be designed around labour market value. Second, that the most successful technical training is relational, it's locally rooted, and it's tailored to regional strengths. Third, it needs to match the clarity of that GCSE to A-level to university pipeline. Fourth, it must be valued earlier. Technical training can't be simply chosen by those failing academic schooling. And finally, it must be designed according to what has historically worked here over the centuries, what works internationally today, and where the most encouraging signs are regionally, as we'll hear later. With that, I'll hand back to the panel. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that. So what we'll do now is we'll have some brief remarks from all our panellists, and then hopefully Andy will also be joining us at about 11. There will be time for questions, so don't worry about that. So perhaps we could start with Ian. Some brief remarks?
Yeah, very, very happy to. I mean, firstly, thank you to Dan for the presentation and for the report, and to the CSJ for bringing attention to this issue. I'm obviously really interested in this, and not just because I'm the Liberal Democrat skills spokesperson. It really matters at a time when we're focused on economic growth. It surprises me how little attention is focused on skills, because certainly whenever I visit employers in my constituency, or whether I'm talking to employers at national events, small or large, a consistent theme is skills and the need for skills. So it's surprising that it's not higher up the agenda, and grateful for the CSJ bringing some attention to it. I think, to give a bit of context, so I was elected in 2024 for the first time in the general election. And actually coming in with the new Labour government, I think we were quite optimistic about their agenda for skills. There were certainly some alignments with the Lib Dems in the manifestos, and some cause for optimism in terms of bringing in the King's speech, even naming the Skills England bill. There was a devolution bill coming, which had some opportunities for skills as well. And I think it's actually been disappointing what's come along since then. So rather than establishing Skills England as an independent agency, it was first cited within the Department for Education, then moved to DWP. It doesn't give much assurance of a plan. Similarly with the devolution bill, which, as the report highlights, is really critical for skills education. I think the white paper for the devolution bill was positive, and then when we actually saw the bill, it was another disappointment. And these might seem like arcane things, but they are having an impact. So even now, Skills England is locked into a bit of a battle with the construction sector over standards for new apprenticeships, and the construction industry is really quite worried about the lowering of those standards and the implications for even things like safety. Do you want a staircase or a fire door built by a carpenter that hasn't got the level of qualifications that they might have had previously? So those things do matter. I mean, just to put my own frame on it just quickly, if I may. When I first took on the role as skills spokesperson, someone described the skills system to me as having sort of three components. It's a bit different from other parts of education in that you have the individual, obviously the learner, the provider of that, whether it's an FE college or an independent provider, but of course you have the employer as well. And if you think the classic three-leg stool, all of those need to be supported, otherwise the stool falls over, or maybe the school. And I think you know, in that sense, you can see problems with or issues with all elements of the school, whether it's sort of underfunding of further education colleges, support for individuals in choosing the right path. I think particularly there's a lack of focus on the employers, though, actually, and industry, and you can see that again in the figures that show just how much investment in skills by employers has declined. So I think making all those work together and not just getting focused on one leg of the stool, but just making sure that they're all supported is absolutely vital, and it really does matter. The figure of nearly 1 million not in education, employment or training is shocking, and we really should be ashamed of that as a country, because every one of those individual tragedy and an opportunity missed. And as I say, it's also really national economic self-sabotage to not be giving those people those opportunities. So really grateful, again, just to reiterate, for the opportunity to talk about this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So Louise, you're on the front line of many of these issues. Can you just tell us a bit more about what Jericho does and your take on this excellent report?
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for inviting me along today. Again, I suppose taking, rather than a political viewpoint, I'm here representing the lives of those young people and their experiences and the impact that has on them. So as we've heard, there's nearly 1 million young people not in education, employment or training across the country. So Jericho is really focused on trying to change that stat and the trajectory of those young lives. So just, you said, Jericho's a Birmingham-based charity and also a family of 7 social enterprises. So we provide supported work opportunities for those who face extreme challenges in getting a job. So that is the story of many of the young people who are NEET that we're talking about this morning. I suppose the regional context for us in Birmingham is a city where the percentage of 16, 17-year-old NEETs is higher than the national average. We've got a quarter of children growing up in households with income deprivation. So there's a lot of challenges facing the city, and I think realistic, achievable vocational routes into employment are absolutely essential if we want to see those stats change, but those individual lives that make up those statistics change. So Jericho particularly supports marginalised young people, as well as some work with survivors of modern slavery. So we do this through a whole range of programmes, including supported apprenticeships within our social enterprises. We also do some shorter term placements in partnership with local schools. So particularly for those children that are struggling with that mainstream pathway and that more academic route, perhaps struggling with anxiety, school attendance. And we also offer a range of part-time opportunities as well. So trying to provide that sort of menu of different opportunities for individuals. And for almost all those we work with, that traditional academic pathway is just not quite the right fit. Many have found mainstream school environments a challenge. Lots experience high levels of anxiety, maybe neurodivergence, challenging home environments, perhaps brought up in a culture that doesn't model employment and education as well. So they've not grown up sort of having that example. These challenges are complex and intersecting, and they make progressing into employment really challenging. But I think all of these individuals have got really valuable contribution to make, and it's just finding a way of unlocking that. They are capable of learning and creating that independent future if they're given the right opportunities in the right environment, and that's what we really want to do. And I think vocational qualifications, those technical routes, can play a really important role in that. We, alongside our work opportunities, provide a whole holistic package of support. So it's addressing those core challenges, as I mentioned, sort of anxiety, lack of skills, lack of confidence. And we try and adapt what we do and the way we deliver that to meet the needs of those individuals. So I suppose by way of example, it always helps to relate it to an individual, doesn't it? But one of our apprentices, Darren, had really high levels of anxiety, really capable individual, but really struggled with school attendance because of his anxiety. He was due to return to sit his GCSEs, but again, anxiety prevented him walking into that exam hall. So we've got a really capable young lad, but came out at 16 with no qualifications at all. So he joined us, really reticent teenager. His anxiety made it difficult to communicate with customers and colleagues, but actually being in that right environment that saw the potential in him, could meet him where he was at and develop him, meant that he was really successful in his apprenticeship. He's now confident to go on and apply for more technical apprenticeships and pursue that technical career. And he, most importantly, believes in his ability to contribute. Now, that's not specifically at T-level, but it's an example of vocational training, really unlocking the potential in an individual and being an alternative to that academic route. Many of those we support don't have qualifications at all, just like Darren. And that's a particularly high problem in Birmingham. So we've got around 11% of 16 to 24-year-olds report not having any qualifications. But it's often not because of lack of ability or lack of potential. So it's finding ways of unlocking that. So I recognise that those vocational routes can absolutely be really powerful in doing that, and a really powerful tool for those where that academic pathway isn't the right route. I do think in our efforts to kind of elevate the standing of those technical qualifications, it's really important that we remain inclusive of those who are really technically gifted and capable, but perhaps for many reasons have struggled with that kind of navigating the school system and the academic route in the earlier years as well. So I think it's really important not to forget them.
Lord Gove, when it comes to education, you've been there, done that, you've worn the T-shirt. Can I get your response to Daniel's report and why it's going in the wrong direction in many ways?
Thank you. For the first thing to say is it's a pleasure to be here at the CSJ, which is a think tank that has phenomenal reach. Listened to in Downing Street, paid attention to by Reform, graced by the presence of the next generation of Lib Dem leaders. There are few think tanks that have the reach of the CSJ. The second thing is a particular thank you to Jonathan Gullis for the role that he played in steering this. How can I talk about education when Jonathan was my pupil? And now he's proved himself to be not just persistently absent from the Conservative Party, but excluded. Nevertheless, Jonathan is a great man and was a wonderful minister, and there are a few people more passionate about education than he. Tony Blair once said that he could declare war on Iran in the middle of a speech on skills, and no one would notice, because the subject had such a narcoleptic effect on the political classes. So it's great that so many people have turned up today to engage in this detailed discussion of technical and vocational education. I'm deeply grateful, and it's due, I'm sure, to Jonathan being on the panel rather than any other panelist. I was Education Secretary for 4 years, and of course I made many mistakes. And my biggest mistake was that I was too consensual, too euphemistic, and insufficiently attached to telling the truth. So let me drop some truth bombs, first of all. There's a fundamental error that many people make, and which has been reflected in the well-intentioned thinking of so many who've already spoken today. And that is to conflate two things. The problem that we have with 20, 30, 40% of students who do not achieve their full potential, who are either persistently absent or don't secure GCSEs, and the quality of technical and vocational education. And the conflation of the two reinforces a particular point. And that particular point is, broadly, you're not doing well, vocational is for you. And yet at the same time, we talk about parity of esteem between vocational, technical, and academic. So we talk about it, but our actions are always to confirm that vocational and technical are for those who don't succeed, who fall behind, who may be prone to anxiety or come from difficult family backgrounds, or for whom academic education is just not fit. That is a failure of ambition as a country. Other countries, more successful countries, do not think in that way. The number of children who are, as a result of physical, cognitive impairments, incapable of accessing a full academic curriculum is about 5%, maybe 10 at a stretch. It is not the case, as the best schools show, that securing 5 or 8 good GCSEs at the age of 16 in academic subjects is beyond the ability of the overwhelming majority of children. So the first thing is to recognize that and not to lower our ambition and to make excuses and to lack that ambition for those children. Many of their parents don't. More than 90% of parents would like their children to have the option of going to university. Not saying it's right for them necessarily, but to have that option. Why should we be less ambitious? Why should we demand that schools are less, or acquiesce in schools being less successful than the very best? Second thing, the 2 most important vocational subjects, English and maths. The key to everything else, clear communication and numeracy. And so therefore any attempt to dilute a focus on those is a mistake. The third thing, rigor. Why are there people with university degrees who are unemployed? Because they've done the wrong degrees in the wrong institutions. And the content of those degrees is insufficiently rigorous to render them attractive to employers. That is why already, without government intervention, a number of shrewd young people are making the decision to go for apprenticeships or to go for some form of direct work route into employment after the age of 18. But that invites us to ask the critical question, which I know Jonathan and the CSJ are engaged in, which is what is the content of vocational and technical education? Because we talk about apprenticeships overall. And of course, in the public mind, what an apprenticeship is a period of time spent learning a practical skill, whether that skill might be in hair and beauty or in catering, or, and again, this is very much in the public mind, in engineering and manufacturing. But far too often, the time that is spent in apprenticeships is spent on what one might call academic adjacent or sub-academic learning, rather than actually acquiring and honing and refining a technical and practical skill which will bring economic rewards subsequently. So the attention of policymakers should be both on the rigor of higher education in order to weed out or to render less attractive those university subjects which are not of value to the student. Or if they are of value, then the student and their family should bear the cost. And then to focus on those the content of vocational and technical education. We started that work when Alison Wolfe investigated vocational and technical education and made the point that, for example, it was quite wrong to allocate the worth of 4 GCSEs to a technical qualification in cake decoration. I love a well-decorated cake. And the art of the baker or patissier is not to be dismissed. But what was happening then was an attempt to say to those who were not being well taught, fundamentally, to the age of 16, here you are, we're dignifying our failure by giving you a piece of paper that says that you are a success after all. The temporary satisfaction that that child and that family enjoys at that moment is almost literally a sugar rush, because they will then find that they are not in the employment market viewed in the same way as those who might have 5 rigorous GCSEs, or those who had a vocational or technical qualification which contained within it a higher level of mastery. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Jonathan, as well as being a former education minister, you were a teacher, as I understand. Can I just get your thoughts on what Daniel...
Well, I've really pulled the short straw by following Michael in the speech. So I'm delighted and grateful for everyone who's on the panel. I just want to quickly say a big thank you to Andy Cook and to Ed Davis, who brought me into the CSJ to work on this particular project, and to the people like you've heard Dan Lilly already, but also Ben Miller, who's I think around somewhere as well, because that team, the three of us, have been working hard on this first report, which is, as Dan said, going to be a series of reports regarding what we want to see happen going forward. And I think Michael, for me, hit the nail on the head when he talked about the rigour. Look, I entered teaching in 2011, so I went through my entire career under the Gove-Gibb reforms and saw the institutional sort of hatred initially, but actually the importance and the many fine people within it who wanted to work under that kind of academic strain to really give kids an opportunity. I had every advantage given to me in my life, and the whole purpose was of me entering teaching was to give back and try and enable the social mobility that my parents and my grandparents enabled me to have and allowed me to eventually become what I always dreamed of being, a member of parliament. So what is the report looking at? Well, first of all, the report looks at the history, and for those, Dan and I being history geeks, we were excited to look at the history of education. And if you look at it, the problem is that schools are not built to accommodate technical education. They were first brought in order for the Church of England to obviously be able to push around the importance of literacy and numeracy within the sector. Technical education was done by employers or by guilds outside of the sphere. Then you had the 1944 Butler Act, which then tried to sort of bring everything together, the tripart system, where you had comprehensive, grammar, and technical. The problem was there was no serious investment into technical education in terms of building institutions to deliver that. And so we ended up actually with a dual system. It was either the grammar school or the comprehensive school. And of course, then we went to secondary moderns. We had Tony Blair's pledge on 50% of needing to go to university, which I'm very grateful for this Prime Minister having recognised as a huge barrier within the system and rightly said that that needs to be scrapped. And instead, we want 2/3 of young people going into either further or higher education. That has been, I think, an important statement and rights or wrong in Labour's past. And the fact the Prime Minister has shared his own lived experience with his father's work, I think, is quite meaningful and understanding. So the other thing that we then need to then look at is what is happening. And the reality is that whilst we have over 900 technical and vocational qualifications, which is obviously absurd at too many different levels and far too broad, this therefore creates mass confusion in the system. Parents have a lack of ability or trust to understand what is in the interests of my child. The employer is unaware of what works for them in terms of what skills are being taught and are they directly applicable to the workforce. And the people themselves start to question whether or not this is the right thing. And through no fault of their own, nor the fault of schools, obviously we'll hear from their teachers who went down the traditional academic route of GCSE, A-levels and university, that is the path to success. And so ultimately it therefore leads to, as we've seen, a shocking number of young people choosing not to look even at the apprenticeship route because simply have failed to understand it. Which is why when we saw qualifications like the T-level introduced, whilst it was well-meaning, I think the last government has to accept it did not push it or explain it to the workforce or employers or young people enough, with the fact that we've got surveys showing that 1/3 of employers don't even know what a T-level is based on surveys that have been done. Now, the government under Bridget Phillipson and the Secretary of State for the Department of Education has rightly talked about needing to sort out the vocational system and has talked about introducing V-levels as a way to streamline, make sure that there's no natural crossover with T-levels and BTECs, as they will now be rebranded into V-levels in the future. But also, then work needs to be undertaken, as Michael says, is what's the rigour that's going to be put into those V-levels? What's the learning going to be? Are the skills applicable to the workforce of today? So, for example, we have to accept automation and AI are going to have to play a huge part in that. What is that featuring within the current curriculum? As well as obviously looking at those more traditional skills. I remember Churchill China, a ceramics manufacturer, and they said that they're spending their time teaching their workforce to look in a Japanese method of looking at the conveyor belt that the pottery will go through. How can we speed things up? What can you do? And actually in trying to engage their workforce to come up with ways of reducing costs and at the same time coming up with solutions, but retaining the workforce, because it's the workforce that is creating the solutions to those very problems. And I think that in itself is very creative. And a workforce, by the way, will overwhelmingly not have more than maybe 5 GCSEs at best in a place, sadly, like Stoke-on-Trent, where the education system has worked hard, but the qualifications are still well below national averages, meaning many young people, unless they're able to move to university and beyond, are being stuck in a cycle of poverty that is heartbreaking to see. So I think that the key therefore is to remember that what we want to see is, I say, a system that's really considered about how we can create an equal to the EBAC that Michael introduced. The EBAC, the English Baccalaureate, is something that the CSJ, and in this report we want to make abundantly clear, must remain and must be respected. But we need a technical alternative with the same rigour and therefore the same seriousness that's taken by employers and of educationalists alongside it, as you see in Germany, as we see in the Netherlands, in order to offer parity of esteem in its truest form possible. Because there has been a lot of talk about the English Baccalaureate, and the reality is, if you have a look at what Dan pointed out in his slides earlier, there are many kids that by the age of 11, whether we like it or not, we can see the destination they're likely to go on. That doesn't mean we have any less expectations for them. But instead of them making them sit the full EBAC, could we have a technical back alongside of it that might be better suited? They still absolutely must do English, must do maths. I would say they must do science as well. But what else can be done in that space to encourage and look beyond, as I say, traditional maybe history and geography, where someone like myself would be naturally more excited or interested to look at. So I think that is rigorously important that we have that debate and have that discussion to come up with something that runs alongside of it. So, for example, some schools are already selecting, and it's a dirty word that's used in the education sector, but the truth of the matter is only 40% of pupils are actually entering the full EBAC already. Schools are already streamlining kids into different groups. They're just not publicising it like we used to see on data. So let's be honest about it and say from 11, we are going to look at pass to 13. And at the same time, let's give those on lower prior attainment the boost they need in their literacy and in their numeracy to make sure they get that time. And at 13, let's start having that honest conversation about which stream will suit which children to make sure they come out with the best outcomes that works in their interests and this country's interests. Because we all know and we all hear continuously about skill shortages in the economy. Well, there's either two ways we're going to solve this. There's either the way that's been done relentlessly by governments of all colours over many years, which is to pull the lever of mass migration in order to fill those vacancies, which is a cheaper solution for both the business and for government. Or there is an honest solution, which is we invest, and it will take a large amount of investment, and then rather than having a 2 to 5 year navel gazing exercise, have a 10 to 20 year understanding to make sure that we invest instead in our young people, in our workforce, so that those people can then fill those vacancies and fill those roles. And that means making sure that we have that understanding, for example, of something that I think Nick Gibb introduced, which I understood the logic of, where he said, for example, for an apprenticeship, you had to pass your English and maths in order to do it. For me, that was a barrier to young people. They didn't need to be put in their way had they already post-16 studied those qualifications. So rather than send a kid who's likely to be truanting from school, very sadly, or have difficulties at home, rather than make them go back to college, which would be a battle in itself, just get them into the workforce under an employer who cares and will invest in them, because employers relentlessly tell you they invest in their workforce because they need their workforce to have the skills going forward in order to make their business profitable as well. So there is one exciting chapter, and I think I've just seen the man out in the corner of my eye. There is one exciting exercise that is taking place to have an alternative to the EBAC, a technical qualification route that will bring the rigour and the respect with employers, but also make sure that it gives kids in the Greater Manchester area that real opportunity. And that's why when Andy Burnham introduced the MBAC, as it's known, the Manchester Baccalaureate, I was unashamedly one of the very first I like to consider politicians at that time to come out in support of it. Because regardless of party politics, what Andy has done is worked tremendously hard to get employers on side to offer high-skilled, quality work experience for young people, get colleges and schools talking to each other about making sure that there are clear, defined routes into employment that may be from not just the traditional GCSE, A-level and university route, and made sure that he's brought the community of Greater Manchester on side with that too. And our next report will be specifically exploring the Manchester Baccalaureate and Andy's, what was, an idea one day in his head to now the conception, to the point where I can tell you every head of a multi-academy trust in Stoke-on-Trent has gone to learn about the MBAC, and they're now trying to create the Stoke back. So Andy is inspiring already across all regions of our country. So I'm delighted to hand over to Mayor Andy Burnham.
Yes, I don't think he needs any introduction. So Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham, there's only one question on everyone's lips today. What's the secret to the MBAC success?
That's it. That's all everybody is talking about all over the country. And of course, I've read every single word of the CSJ report, the brilliant report, because I didn't have anything else to do at the weekend. So I'm really familiar with it all, and it is wonderful. And Jonathan, can I just say, you were, exactly as you described, an early supporter, and it really meant something to me, actually, that what I was saying had that reach when you gave me that support. And I think it's brilliant, actually, that the main parties are all signatories to this report. It does have to be cross-party. And finally, if we have that cross-party alliance, I think we can make the change in this country that we need to around the status of technical education. And Michael, if I could just thank you too while you are there, because it was the Trailblazer devolution deal that you and I agreed in 2023, which opened the door for Greater Manchester to go into this space with a role in post-16 education. And we took that opportunity and really ran with it, and it wouldn't have happened without you. What I wanted to say today is just to describe why this has to be mission critical for our city region. We have to have a place where there's a path for every person growing up in Greater Manchester, for them and for what we want them to achieve, but also for our economy. We risk the growth that Greater Manchester has got if we cannot supply the talent into a fast changing industry in Greater Manchester. And, you know, that has very much been the thinking behind what I've tried to do. If you go back to the sort of second half of the last century, we suffered from a combination of deindustrialization and a shift under all governments in the education system to the university route. That happened under all parties, so there's, you know, no one's not got something to answer for here. But we, you know, certainly the governments I was in the late 90s, early 2000s, setting that 50% target around university, that would only have been justified had there been a similar ambition stated for the other 50%, but it never was, and that, in my view, was not right in any way, shape, or form. So that was the difficult legacy in terms of the deindustrialization, the change in the education system, and obviously what you then have is, you know, the high levels of NEETs and unemployment through the ages. Obviously, we've used devolution in Greater Manchester to try and reverse all of this, and with some success. We are now in a position where we are the fastest growing city region in the UK. Average growth over the last decade of around 3%, it's double the UK average. And last week I put out a plan for the reindustrialisation of Greater Manchester, based around our 5 core sectors of creative and media, digital and tech, life sciences, materials and manufacturing, and the green economy, low carbon. We have 5 physical clusters now in relation to those sectors that are already built or being built. Media City, which will double in size over the next decade. City Centre Manchester is a huge digital and tech centre now, with a strength in cyber and AI. The Oxford Road Corridor has a cluster of life science industry, and the UK Biobank will open its new HQ on the Manchester Science Park very soon, and that will cement its status. We are building Atom Valley now, which is an advanced materials and advanced manufacturing cluster in the northeast of Greater Manchester. And similarly, a green energy cluster is rising out of the ground in Carrington in the southwest of Greater Manchester. The reason why I reel all of that off is I have to have an education system that plays into those sectoral strengths and into those clusters. And currently we don't have that, and that's why I think we are risking our growth if we don't make a change. But think of it in the positive way. If we have strong pathways into those clusters, into industry across Greater Manchester, that is completely game-changing for our city region going forward, and actually is a model for growth more broadly, one where on every level and every layer you've got the whole thing pulling in the same direction. Just if I could say something about, you know, what we have done with the MBAC and the difference it has made. we have found that if you start to prioritize the subject, and if you talk about technical education and you work hard to engage employers, you immediately have an impact in terms of the quality of what is on offer to young people. I have asked the Greater Manchester Growth Company to use their contacts book in business to secure the 45-day T-level placements for our young people. And we've just recently announced that we've secured 1,000 in the last year, 375 employers, the NHS providing placements, the B Network, our public transport system, Greater Manchester Police, alongside names like IBM, Auto Trader. You can see a huge number of blue chip names in our city region who are providing placements. And that's critical because it gives technical education some of the prestige of the university route. If those big, well-known names are opening their doors and letting young people come through. And it shows in the statistics. Greater Manchester last year achieved a 93.5% pass rate on T-levels, which is 2 percentage points higher than the England average. Normally, we would underperform slightly the England average. Well, we're overperforming on T-levels. And I would say to Michael and Jonathan, T-levels were the right reform, and the last government deserves credit for it. The 45-day work placement, to me, is the game changer. It finally creates a template for work experience in this country that we've never had before. And 45 days is long enough for a young person in Oldham, where I'm speaking to you from now, or in any other part of Greater Manchester. It's long enough for them to lose the imposter syndrome and to feel that they can belong in one of those big organizations that I've just mentioned. And I believe we should be making it mandatory, actually, for local areas to have a supply of 45-day work placements for every young person who wants one. If that was a guarantee growing up, that you can have a 45-day placement, I think it would have a hugely beneficial impact on the rate of young people not in education, employment or training, which I think I'm right in saying currently is around the 1 million mark. So there's plenty to build on here, but my final point today is to emphasize something in the report, and it's that absolutely undeniable call for an employer-led approach to this. This will only work, we will only build a modern technical education system on a par with the academic route if it is truly employer-led, because you have to work back from the jobs that they have and the opportunities that they have, and then work back into the education system to build those paths back for young people. They have to specify what they want and what they need, and then you build from there. And the reason why the MBAC is important, and why I resisted calls to drop the M from it, people said it should just be a national system. Our economy is different from the West Midlands or from the Liverpool City region. There would be a lot of crossover, of course there would, but there are different sectors in those places: ports and marine in Liverpool, automotive in Birmingham. And actually, by calling it the MBAC, you make it very relevant to young people, because Manchester is their world. It's where they want to be, and it connects them to all of that. So for me, the requirement for it to be employer-led is crucial. And also the fact that economies are different mean something that we haven't yet achieved, but I hope this report will achieve. It's the full devolution of post-16 education, because I believe this has to be built by local areas working with employers and putting employers in that position of leadership, as we have tried to do. We have failed on this because we haven't had a devolved approach, and we've tried to do it from a national level, and that simply hasn't worked. What Stoke, those head teachers in Stoke that Jonathan mentioned, what they need is obviously got to be linked to their own economy. So I think we've seen resistance from the Department for Education to that strong devolved role. Obviously, we've seen the creation of Skills England. A national body to oversee standards and consistency is no bad thing, but it should be overseeing a highly devolved approach to technical education around the country. And that is a battle that has not yet been won. But with the cross-party support lining up behind this call for rewiring technical education, perhaps we may be able to make that breakthrough soon. So huge thanks to all of my friends there at the Centre for Social Justice. I've always appreciated your support for what we are trying to do. I think the country needs this change because too many young people are growing up and they're hitting their middle teenage years and they lose hope because they can't see where school is taking them. They can't see a path for them. Well, we think there is an answer in Greater Manchester. We think it's time to back the MBAC fully and unequivocally, devolve powers and funding to build it properly. And if you did that in all parts of the country, maybe this country would feel like it's starting to function better again, particularly as young people are concerned. Thank you very much for listening, everybody.
I am going to open it up for questions very short. Just out of interest, how many of you here had some sort of careers advisor in your school or in college, someone that you could talk to? Quite a few. And how many sort of recommended something other than filling out or helping to fill up your UCAS form or university? Anyone was talked about actually technical education and how that could be beneficial? Nobody, not a single hand. I think that tells you everything. So I'm going to open it up for questions. If you just raise your hand, tell me who you are. Andy, I do want to address, there is an elephant in this room, and before, to stop this perhaps getting out of control, I just wanted, if you might say a few words. I mean, you said on social media you were disappointed last night about the Labour Party's decision. I mean, do you want them to change their mind, and do you think the economy is going in the wrong direction?
Oh, I've said everything I think I'm going to say about that today. I'm very much focusing on my job, I think I'm just going to leave it there if that's okay. I'd rather just talk about what we're doing on technical education in Greater Manchester.
Can I ask more broadly to the panel? I mean, Andy, you talk very passionately about this being employer-led. You want a 45-day placement for everybody. I mean, in what ways are government tax policies helping or hindering that cause? I don't know if anyone wants to start in the room.
I'll take a stab at it. I mean, I talked about sort of not the employer leg of the stool being possibly the weakest at the moment. I think it is both employer-led in terms of getting in touch with being employer-led in the system, and that's why the concerns around what's happening with Skills England at the moment are serious. But then also, that drop-off in investment by employers, what can we do to incentivise that? We provide tax credits for capital investment. Why not investment in human capital? So I think there is a principle there of incentivising employers rather than just beating them with a stick to say, you must provide this.
Yeah.
Could I jump in on that point, if that's okay? I think there's an obvious change that could be made, and it's full retention of the growth and skills levy in regions and local areas. Because I hear that big companies particularly feel a frustration at times that they can't deploy that funding in the way that they would want. If you want an employer-led system, I think the funding that business is already providing should be completely retained within the areas where they are operational, and that to us is a change that is desperately needed to make. I think there's a winning hearts and minds point, and I've had this with the MBAC. I mentioned the work our growth company has done. Using their contacts book, if you like, and going around and ringing up and trying to get T-level placements, which is what they've done very successfully. The common experience is the placement works better than both sides expected. The young person definitely gets more from it than perhaps they expected, but the business too. It's long enough for a young person to feel at home and then start providing insight to organisations that they find incredibly incredibly valuable. So because it's of quality, because it's long enough and it's of quality, it actually works for both sides. And I was at IBM recently. I asked them a couple of years ago when they were opening a new office in Manchester City Centre. They asked me, is there something you want from us? I said, well, yes, actually, T-level placements. And I was with them recently, meeting that I think the first 9 that they've got, and they just said, we're just blown away by it. It's just the way to recruit. And once you've made that change, and once people have experienced it, what we find is it quickly becomes established.
Any questions?
Oh, sorry, just to add on, look, I think it's undeniable from what we can see from the economic data being produced that hiking insurance on employers has had a detrimental impact on the workforce. And then, quite frankly, something that many people don't want to talk about is that equalising the minimum wage for an 18-year-old to a 25-year-old is also going to have a negative impact. A 25-year-old is going to have different qualifications, different skill sets, and different experience. It's going to have, therefore, an ability, well, in a normal workforce, for that person to be paid naturally higher than someone who's coming into the system for the very first time. And those two factors together, and I speak to ceramic manufacturers in Stoke-on-Trent, as well as those in other sectors too, who have said that has had a negative impact on them looking for youth unemployment. And if you look at youth employment, and if you look at the work done by the Centre for Social Justice, it is hard to see the fact, hard to miss, the fact that there is half of those who have now come off payroll are young people. This is a very worrying trend, and it is going to have a detrimental impact on people feeling good. And obviously the papers today saying about 700,000 graduates currently on benefits rather than being in work. This is, again, a worrying statistic. So I think in the broader scheme of where the economy's at, employers are feeling the pinch quite aggressively. But where Andy is absolutely correct is if we haven't got a mayoralty like you do in Greater Manchester, in Staffordshire, the Chambers of Commerce could be working right now with their contact books to be making sure that the colleges have the ability to provide those important T-level entries, like in digital in Stoke, where, for example, we have, let's say, the digital T-level on offer from the Sixth Form College. We also have Staffordshire University, which is the leader in the country when it comes to video games and e-sports graduates. And something I didn't think I'd ever say, and probably made it sound very uncool now by saying it. But, you look at the fact that in South Korea, you'll get 40, 50,000 people showing up to watch an esports tournament. The fact that the NIA in Birmingham, 100,000 young people descend from across the country. The fact you've got esports teams based at the Copper Box in London. Stoke-on-Trent has the full fibre, has the university, has the digital T-level as well, and yet has not been able to grasp those opportunities because that lack of devolution in giving those powers to areas and regions in order to make that possible has been a huge thing. So I think you've got Chambers of Commerce who should be using their phone books to help with the colleges get through, because there's lots of well-meaning teachers and lots of well-meaning college leaders. It's very different when the Chambers of Commerce is calling up saying, come on, you need to step up and do your bit too.
Any questions? Yes, sir.
Just picking up on the growth and skills.
Please introduce yourself. Yeah.
Hi there, Steve Rigby from Rigby Group. We're a large UK employer. Just picking up on the growth and skills levy point that Andy referenced, which I completely concur with. There is a cost to providing 2 weeks of work experience, which is being asked by every employer. Certainly a cost to have a meaningful 6-week process in a business. Using the growth and skills levy to fund those initiatives and putting businesses back in control of that. Frankly, even if we had to increase growth and skills levy by 10 basis points to 0.6%, I think businesses, if they could get back in charge of learning and development, focused on young people and, importantly, on adults as well, who are going to have to go through their own transition, if we could get businesses back engaged with some level of control, which we don't have today, often I give mine back to our combined authority or to our charity partners, because we can't, frankly, give apprenticeships to people in their 40s and 50s. It's not the right mechanism. But if we could somehow get in control of that growth and skills levy, even if we had to pay more, I think businesses would really get on board.
I mean, Lord Gove, before it was called the growth and skills levy, it was the apprenticeship.
Yes, exactly.
And there was a chart, I think, on Daniel's presentation that showed the line basically going down, not up. Why do you think the Tories failed to raise apprenticeship numbers in the way that you had envisaged?
I don't know. Steve's idea seems sensible to me.
There you go. The gentleman at the back in the grey shirt.
I'm John from Building Futures Together. We're a social enterprise based in Leeds. Some of the stuff Andy said, like I say, we're a small organisation, but we're piloting a project with a local school academy. schools are the experts around the education. We're providing the vocational element. We also work very closely with a couple of local businesses and their supply chain. And what we've proved is, if we get the engagement right, particularly for our students in the vocational side, they do become switched on to the education side because they've got an end goal, they know what it means. We then need the employers to provide opportunities, jobs. That's been piloted at the moment and it seems to be working. I think the levy fund's quite interesting because there's a lot of big organisations that underspend, and that goes into a pot that you can apply for. It's not well known, and there's also restrictions around it. So like this gentleman says, if we can relax those a little bit, we could be quite good with how we spend it.
Any response?
Can I jump in? Oh, sorry, it was in the room.
No, go ahead, Andy. Go ahead.
I think those two last points are excellent points. You know, and having a flexible levy that allows you to build from 16 with work experience, and all of the other things that we would want to do is really crucial. And you know, I hope that's a cross-party call that we can build. On the second point about, you know, the visibility of things for young people, what bedevils technical education is just how fragmented it is, and that's hard for employers and for the young people. And what we do need as part of this is some infrastructure to give young people a clear line of sight to the opportunities within their city, region, or the place where they live. A UCAS style system for T-levels and apprenticeships is what we need. There has to be a way for a young person in year 9 considering their options to be able to find those paths and see them and see where those T-level placements are, see where the apprenticeships are, so that they can then make much more informed decisions. So I do think we have a website that does this, GMAX, Greater Manchester Apprenticeships and Career Service. It has up-to-date, relevant job information. It shows young people current jobs being advertised in Greater Manchester now and the salary of those jobs in the 5 key sectors that I mentioned before. And until you can give young people the visibility of the opportunities, I think everyone will find it hard to navigate this system. But if you put everything in a structure and you allow young people to see it in that way, then I think you do something quite dramatic in terms of their levels of aspiration, their commitment to school. Last quick point I'll make is we do a survey of our year 10s called the Be Well survey. What it reveals is young people experience a loss of connection to school as they go through the school years. They arrive with a high level of connection, and by year 10, many report that they don't know where school is taking them. You know, we can't look at figures like that and not do something quite radical here. And hopefully, some of the things we've put forward do meet that test.
More questions? I'll take the gentleman in the green top.
Again, good morning, panel. I'll just start off by taking the point. I am a careers advisor, by the way. Things have changed. Yeah, there is more being done. So young people today are getting access, definitely from me anyway, yeah, in terms of understanding what's going on. But my question here is really, as a careers advisor, I see how strongly young people choices are shaped by the quality advice they receive. But what specific reforms are needed to ensure young persons, regardless of their schools or postcode, has access to high quality, impartial guidance that gives them technical routes, real visibility and credibility, which is really picking on your point, you know, how can we as an advisor really go out and start to really show young people that what's the difference between the two different routes?
Louise, you're at the coalface of this. What would you say to this gentleman?
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't sound Vince Gordon from Grace Foundation. Realised I didn't get the name.
I think one of the key points is making people aware of the range of options that are available. So raising awareness of apprenticeships, although those are harder for employers to offer nowadays, I think, with the increasing employment costs. But just showing young people what routes are there, particularly for those that are perhaps disengaged, as you talked about, Andy, those that are disengaged in the school system at the moment, actually giving them that taste of other options that are more vocational, showing them what range of options are there, those employment-based routes as well, giving them a taster of what work is like, can often help with re-engagement as well. So I think just really important that they're made aware of the range of opportunities available.
Great. Any more questions? Lady in blue top.
Hi, Genevieve Hall-Allen from The Telegraph. I've got a couple of questions for Andy. First of all, on skills. Do you think that Labour, if it kind of fails to grasp this technical skills issue and fails to get the NEETs numbers down, then the party is just going to continue to lose support among young people, perhaps to reform? And secondly, if I may, I'm afraid, on the small subject of the Gorton and Denton by-election, there are MPs who are kind of hoping that the NEC changes its mind on this or the decision can get reversed. If that happens, would you run? Would you run?
So on the first question, I think the government has made some good moves with the curriculum review. It's, if you like, tilted the balance back towards technical education. And I think that's a really positive thing. And consequently, the Ofsted inspection regime is changing as well. So schools in the past have been, if you like, given an incentive to focus on the traditional GCSEs. Now I think there will be more scope to be able to have a more balanced approach, which I think will be really beneficial. So the government has done something that actually was a critical enabler of a better technical education system. But what I would obviously now like to see it do is follow through, devolve post-16, make that commitment to a 45-day work placement, as I say, a guarantee across the country, and then really, cement this new system in place. I think there is so much we can do to reduce the number of young people who are NEET. It's a shocking figure, the one I gave before. We in Greater Manchester provide a free bus pass to our 16 to 18s. I know young people in London get something similar. But again, surely that should be standard everywhere. Surely there should be no barrier in their way at 16 to connecting with the opportunity that they want. But sadly, the cost of transport, I think, as the report makes clear, is a barrier to young people. And so I would encourage the government to look at all of those things. If all 16 to 18s in England had free bus travel, I think you would easily recoup the investment in that by reducing the rate of young people not in education, employment or training. And on the second point, I'm afraid I'm going to come back to my earlier reply. I refer the Honourable Lady to the reply I gave earlier, I think is all I could say here.
Any more questions? I'll take a sweep. This gentleman. Any more? Yeah. And the lady at the back. Yeah, those two. And this gentleman here.
Thank you. My name is Satnam Verdi. I'm chair of the Education Law Association. In that context, I'm very conscious about the disparity, nationally in things like fixed-term exclusion rates and permanent exclusion rates, and even absenteeism. They are, for whatever reason, much lower in London and the South East, much lower. So, I'd welcome the panel's sort of comments on how we address that, perhaps in the context of, there's a very excellent report on which I congratulate the CSJ, section 5.2, about the imbalance in favour of London, but also in the context of, are there lessons that the rest of the country can learn from London schools, rather than just point out, the apparent imbalance. London schools do have much lower, PX rates, etc. Some of that is correlated with bizarrely high immigration in classes. So, are there cultural factors at play? And so I just wondered if that's something which the CSJ might want to explore in future reports, to see why these discrepancies are so large. Thank you.
And just quick fire, because I'm conscious of time. the lady in the red jacket, and then this gentleman at the front.
Hi, thank you to the panel for doing this. Andy's mentioned Manchester's got more pass rates on T levels than the rest of the country. Growth obviously better in Manchester at the moment than many areas. Do you guys see a link between that? And obviously to Andy, do you see a link between those two? This honourable lady will try one final time. Andy, do you have a message to any of those MPs today disappointed by that NEC decision? Thank you so much for your time.
And the gentleman at the front.
Good morning. My name's Adam. I'm from Money Wellness. We are one of the largest free debt advice providers in the UK, and we're based out of Media City in Manchester. I think I wanted to touch on financial education and then the importance of that. I think recently we did a survey where we found that 94% of the people that we supported did not receive any financial education growing up, and 4 in 5 of those believe that had they had some financial education, they would not be in debt. And I think kind of the importance of vocational and technical routes. These are going to be youngsters that are going to be getting money through the apprenticeship wages, probably more than they probably had in their life. Make sure that they are aware of the financial education, make sure that they know what they're doing with their money. What's open to the panel is what can we do about financial education to make sure those individuals are informed and educated.
Right, so we've got questions about London's importance, T levels, and just knowing your basic maths. Who wants to go first? Teacher, let's go for
So on London, I think the London Challenge was a brilliant thing, and I'm assuming Michael might correct me, was a premise for some of the work that Michael did when it particularly came to the academisation. And a good friend of mine, David Benson, who was the head of a school, Kensington Aldridge Academy, right beside Grenfell Tower, and obviously had to come in and deal with that enormous tragedy for those young people. But the results he's producing and the destinations of those young people was quite extraordinary. I think actually David had a bit of help alongside Dominic Cummings and others in preparing Michael when he went into government in 2010 for the academisation of our system. I think one of the things that we should do is London Challenge needs to be amplified in every part of the country. I certainly feel frustrated that we didn't fully academise across England when I was in the Conservative Party. Sorry, Michael, there was a Freudian slip there. When I was in the Conservative Party and when obviously I was a member of the Conservative Party in government. And I think you are right to highlight that, of course, if you look at the data, it doesn't lie. When I was in the Education Select Committee, particularly when it comes to white working class and boys and girls, only do they beat Roma Gypsy community when it comes to outcomes. And when you particularly look at Indian community, Chinese community, high and well outperforming, part of that is absolutely parental expectations and parental support in some circumstances too. And we need to have those higher aspirations. But it is, as Andy has said, about making sure that I think we devolve powers. I really do believe in the importance of devolving powers to regions to enable leaders to actually then engage with their local community and offer those routes and opportunities. In terms of financial education, I think I've got some game when I was that I tried to create when I was a teacher on TES's website still as a free resource, if anyone really wants to see how tragic probably it was. But it was designed to try and improve, because I was a citizenship and PSHE teacher. And you are correct, look, I come from a family where my mum's an accountant and I still go to my mum for financial advice, and because I don't still understand the world and how it works. And you are fully correct in saying that we need to have that better understanding and education. How that's delivered, I think, for example, within the maths curriculum, there could be elements where you do get kids to solve basic accountancy problems from a young age, going through, so looking at books and where's the mistake and how can you rectify it, teaching them about APR and mortgage rates, etc., etc. I think that is a really important part of our system too. But as I say, I think what we really want to get across with our report, and it's so important, as you can imagine, I want to plug it again, is those 5 pillars are so important that we want to use as a premise for everything that we go forward. And please do keep an eye out for the second stage of the report, where we will look at the Manchester Baccalaureate to explore with Andy and his team everything that is happening in Greater Manchester. And then hopefully, I'd love to get Ben Houchin in Teesside, Luke Campbell in Hull and East Yorkshire, and any other mayor who can try and negotiate powers from government, or maybe has powers, to try and rectify what's going on in their regions by having a similar system. And we at the CSJ would love to work with them, with the knowledge we've gained from Andy. And I know Andy's also very generous at sharing what he's done to make sure this is something, regardless of which political party runs those areas, can deliver those type of prospects.
Any last words, especially from the man from Manchester?
Well, look forward to seeing you in Manchester, Jonathan. As I say, the first one is excellent, and 5 pillars that you mentioned are the right ones, and we look forward to building on that with you and seeing if we can create a template that could be the B back in Birmingham or the L back in Liverpool. A standard structure that you can tailor locally for the area that you're in. I think that's what we should be working towards here. I think it's perfectly achievable. On the question about the link between what we've done and attainment, I think it is a clear link, a correlation between the two, because it stands to reason. If you improve the quality of the system, if you improve the quality of the work placements, you will increase retention rates, young people who see their course through. And actually, some of the most amazing evidence that's coming from here is that many young people end up working permanently for the employers that provide them the 45-day placements. I think some statistics says over half in some parts of GM. So, this is what this is about. And we're getting placements from the NHS for the first time, midwifery placements, placements at the Christie in their lab. So think about that. Finally, a 14-year-old starts to get a clear route as to how they work in the NHS. That hasn't existed before, but that is hugely motivating, I think. And the B network I mentioned, engineering jobs, driving jobs. We're linking the T levels to things things they know and are very visible in their communities, and giving them a route into those organisations in the end drives better performance, I think, from a learning point of view. And the statistics say that. And just simply, politicians talking about technical education raises its status. It changes the conversation. It lifts it up. And, that's an important part of it as well. And it's why, again, I come back to it. I thank all the main parties for backing this report. And on the question, I suppose I can't do my ignore it act again, can I? What's my message to MPs? Come up to Manchester. There's a by-election about to happen. We need your help. The Greater Manchester Way is built on togetherness. We don't ever here have a politics that's about pitting people one from another. This is a place that is succeeding because of its commitment to people of all backgrounds working together for the common good. That is the Greater Manchester Way, and we want to preserve it. So come and join us. Let's get out there and celebrate what we've achieved in Greater Manchester in the by-election. So thank you for having me, everyone. I better drop off at this point.
Thanks to our lovely panel, Louise, Ian, Michael, Jonathan, and Andy. I think you're free to go.